like and subscribe. Now, teachers of Reddit, they say there are no stupid questions, but what's the most stupid question a student has ever asked you? Not a teacher, but in my senior year of high school I was in a personal finance class. The teacher explained that not paying your taxes could get you incarcerated. Student, so if you don't pay your taxes, the government will light you on fire. Teacher, no, incarcerated means to imprison. You're thinking of incinerated. Student, oh, wait. Then what's taxidermy? We were looking at the Japanese flag and a kid asked, is that why they wear that dot on their forehead? Wasn't a teacher, a lifeguard on a beach. Man with a very thick Chicago accent asked me where the switch was to turn off the waves, so he could let his daughter go out and play in the water. So I told him it was at my boss stand. I would have pointed at the moon. How old was the average 18-year-old in 1942? He then managed to forget he was wearing his own glasses and asked everybody where they were. Not a teacher, but a classmate of mine asked if Asia was a town in China. And, assuming that she was right, said that it was crazy that so many people from our school came from one town. Grade 5 sex edition. I hate a rule that any question can be asked, but I might ask you to ask your parents instead of me. I heard a story about a man who put his stuff into muffins and fed it to grade 1 kids. Well, that is pretty disgusting, and I would think that person would go to jail for doing that. Wouldn't the girls get pregnant from eating it? And before I could say anything another student blurted out no, they wouldn't get pregnant. They haven't gone through puberty yet. I'm thankful for days when kids remind me that they are still kids. When I was in grade 5 sex ed, we were allowed to write down our questions for privacy, and the teacher would read them aloud. Having just viewed an episode of Ally McBeal that included a transgender woman who still had a penis, my question became, if a woman has a penis, does it work the same? I remember him opening up my question, staring at it, folding it up, and moving on. My wife is the teacher, but this is my favorite story of hers. They were discussing how Native Americans relied on hunting buffalo and used all parts of it for food, clothing, shelter, etc. In reference to how they use the buffalo for shelter, one student asked, so do they stack the buffalo on top of each other? Taught English/literature in a juvenile justice long-term treatment facility. I have many great stories. Me. This is a map of the United States. Here is the Midwest, it's where your math teacher is from. Student, oh snap, we're in a war with them. Me, are you thinking about the Middle East? Student, oh yeah, is that a different place? Me, playing a trivia game with students. Johannes Gutenberg invented what? Student, shoots his hand up in the air quickly, before I even finish the question and very sure of his answer. Cheese. Student, reading The Three Little Pigs out loud, and the big bad wolf huffed, and he puffed point, and he passed it around me. I've never heard of that version of the story before, Mr. Student, you wouldn't. Mr. Ellipsis underscore. It's the hood version. Student, reading The Three Little Pigs out loud, and the big bad wolf huffed, and he puffed point, and he passed it around me. I've never heard of that version of the story before, Mr. Student, you wouldn't. Mr. Ellipsis underscore. It's the hood version. That's hilarious. Had a student ask me what are those pyramid-shaped things in Egypt called. Never seen a class laugh that hard before. My wife worked with a woman in the Senate. They were staffers. A long time ago. Just out of college. She, not my wife, said the Pentagon. Isn't that the hexagon-shaped building? To be fair, that would confuse the hell out of anyone planning an attack. Sir, we can't find the Pentagon. There's just this big hexagon. Well, keep looking, damn it. It has to be there somewhere. Warm spring day. Noah/C. Fan blowing in the front of the room. Hand goes up. Can you make the fan ovulate? No, I can't. How can you titillate an ocelot? You oscillate its tits a lot. I'm a corporate trainer, so hopefully this counts. I used to train content for an exam that everyone in our field must take to get licensed. If you didn't pass, you had to go back through the course. Well, I had a dude go through my class 4 times. 4. Here's the conversation we had before his 3rd exam. Guy, what attempt am I on? Me, wait, what? Guy, well, I've taken the test twice, but everyone else in here hasn't taken it. So am I taking my test for the first time or the third time? Me. What do you think? Guy, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. Dude thought that he might be on his first attempt because he was back in a class with a bunch of people who were on face. I was a maths teacher. One day a student apropos of nothing right at the start of the class looked me dead in the eyes and asked me, how did Jesus nail his other hand to the cross? He then began miming the impossible task, musing over whether he had a hammer on a rope in his mouth, and swung his head side to side to insert the final nail. He didn't, I replied. Oh, said the student with a long pause. That makes sense. That is the story of my one stupid question. How old do you have to be to smoke crack? A fellow student at Waukegan circa 1988. I used to volunteer teaching at an after-school program for 14-year-olds. We were doing a project that involved balloons. One boy had blown his balloon, but couldn't get it tied. I tied it and gave it back to him. He immediately tossed it up as it sank to the floor. His face fell, obviously disappointed. He asked, so they are not helium? If the patient have a brain hemorrhage, can we do a tourniquet on the neck to stop it? Well, I mean, technically yes, this kills the human. As part of teaching US government, I ran a zombie apocalypse scenario where the students had to respond to an ongoing crisis in real time using the actual powers of the government as different parts of the government. It was my favorite activity all semester and I went all in, including with a large map of the US that would be updated for every day that passed. As part of this activity, I prepared a handout of a fake news story about the zombie apocalypse beginning in our hometown. It had pictures of zombies shambling around and was written all newspaper style. One day, after handing these out, an 18-year-old student raised their hand and said, Mr. Crowsage, did this really happen? That's an amazing activity. When FEMA released their zombie survival guide, I definitely sat down and read the whole guide instead of just doing a mental checklist of things that I think I need to prepare. The FEMA guide is actually a part of the overall zombie plans created by Homeland Security. Preparing against zombies happens to also work against everything from chemical bioweapons and pandemics down to mass rioting, so the government decided to take some notes. My mom is a teacher's assistant in a 5th grade class. A few weeks ago a girl asked, are bears still real? Bears, beads, Battlestar Galactica. One of these things is not real. You decide. How do islands not float away? Really bagankers. He wrote it down. Funny when a kid thinks this. Scary when it's a member of Congress. I had an assignment for biology where you'd flip a coin to see what traits your baby dragon would have to teach Mendelian genetics. One of my students raised her hand and asked, wait, so dragons are real? I've shared this before, but as a high school biology teacher, a 16-year-old student once asked me, wait, aren't rhinos made of mud? At least he knows his Pokemon types. Why the rhinos aren't standing up? This one looks like it's way over level 42 inches. What the F? Adorable in a 6-year-old. Scary in a 16-year-old. After informing my West African class about the Boston bombing, is Little Wayne okay? Is he? I mean, he's got a codeine problem, so maybe not. After a lengthy explanation of the effects of volcanic eruptions on human communities, I had a grade 6 student ask me why on earth people even make volcanic eruptions. Tourism. It's the best move the Hawaiians and Icelanders have ever made. You joke, but I know a bunch of Hawaiians who want the volcano to explode so that it drives away the tourists and brings the housing prices down. I keep telling them, there is no way in the world I want to be Vesuvius, not to mention the volcano is on the other side of the island. I'm not a teacher, but in 8th grade I had a classmate argue that Martin Luther King freed the slaves. When I tried to correct her, she flipped out and started screaming, name calling, etc. He didn't free the slaves. He wrote the Bible. *NAILED the Bible to Lincoln's front door. Jeez, what an idiot. Everyone knows it was Martin Luther King Jr. that freed the slaves. My wife went to school to be a HS history teacher, and when she had her semester of student teaching, one of the students asked if China had grass, while another who insisted that windmills made wind. This came up all the time when teaching kids. how to do their taxes. I must have had this conversation a dozen times. Student, sir, I don't know what to do at this part. Me, what does the instruction say on that line? Student, add box 23 and 24 and write the answer here. Me, so add box 23 and 24. I to this day have no idea how you teach someone to follow very explicit instructions. Wow, they didn't teach taxes to me in school. We had 3 levels of classes: essentials, applied and academic. With essentials kids, doing taxes and personal finance was an entire unit. We never got beyond multiplying fractions with the essentials kids. With the applied and academic kids, I'd do Let's Not Do Math Fridays every second Friday, where we'd do something that wasn't the regular lesson, but some real life application or just something cool to do with math. I'd do the taxes talk then. How does it feel being the tech support equivalent of academia? I've done tech support as well. I think it was easier to teach grannies how to switch to HDMI 1 input. At least Granny is trying to listen. Also not a teacher, but when I was in high school in health class, while going over reproduction, there was a fellow student who raised her hand and asked if you were sterile. Could you pass it on to your children? The whole class giggled and she, confused, said she was serious. She wanted to know, if you're sterile, could you pass it on to your kids? The teacher, with a smile, said to her, okay, let's think about this. What does it mean to be sterile? She began answering, it means that you can't have K.OHHHHH, followed by another round of laughter from the rest of the class. To her credit, they're finding that people conceived using IVF are having difficulty having children of their own as adults. So not completely a dumb question, depending if you mean completely sterile or unable to reproduce unassisted. At university, I had a classmate that would often show up 20 minutes late to class. The first thing he did after sitting down was raise his hand to ask questions about what the professor had just said. Question after question, until he had caught up with the rest of the class. Absolutely infuriating. That's a bad professor who allowed that. Here's how it would actually go. Student, wait, how did you get to that step? What was the previous step? Professor, do you have a question about this step? Student, no, I have a question about the previous step. Professor, then why didn't you ask it when I went over the previous step? Student, because I wasn't here yet. Professor, toughtity. In 7th grade science class during sex ed, they were talking about oral sex. Mormon girl in class, wait, you can get an STD just from talking about sex. I wouldn't call the question stupid, just no exposure at all to the topic beforehand. Sure, if you say AIDS 10 times in a row you get herpes, well, I guess it could be worse. I once projected a picture of the Earth onto the front whiteboard. A student asked, how do astronauts stand on a planet like that? I can't even begin to comprehend this one. With their feet. For some reason I'm picturing student who is just absolutely stoned in class asking that question. Not a teacher, but there's one I'll never forget. What? Einstein's dead. This was a GCSE class. 15 over 16-year-olds. I had someone in my class who asked, so if Hitler was such a bad person, why don't they just kill him? Don't spoil the ending for him. I'm an English teacher, and I've had a few ask me if Shakespeare is still writing plays. Most of them are the smaller kids though, age 11 to 12, so that's something I suppose. 9th grade Ella, a few chapters into Of Mice and Men. What kind of work does George do on the farm? I'm not sure, probably the same work that everyone else is doing. Oh, it must be hard for him to help out, since he's a mouse. Not really a teacher, but I'm a federal budget analyst and had to train a new employee who had apparently been working in budgets for 20 years or so should have been able to quickly pick things up. She wasn't point. When I finally got her on the right track with our year-end financial reports, I told her she was close, but her numbers were off, so double check them. She responded with, well, wouldn't someone else just fix that? No point, that's exactly what you get paid to do. So you need to put the correct numbers in the report, so we can publish it. What on earth would we do with almost correct financial reports? The next day she just couldn't figure it out, and I said, you're really close. It's probably just rounding, she said. Does it matter? How do you know when you should round it up or down? I said, yes it matters. Just use normal rounding rules. She asked what those are. I very slowly said, you know, 0.0, 0.5 or higher your round up. She had never been familiarized with that apparently. In the end I really felt like I would have been better off teaching a third grader. My degree is in it, but we were required to take an accounting class. Almost everyone in the class was a business major of some sort, with a good half of them going for accounting specifically. By the second week, it had devolved into basic math lessons, because an overwhelming number of students didn't understand the concept of 0.110% 1/10. It sucked for me, because the prof was really good, and I otherwise enjoyed it. We just lost a lot of time to elementary level math in a college course. This explains so much about why my accounting degree required that we have taken calculus prior to even starting any actual accounting courses. I've never used a log in any of my work, but now I realize they were just weeding out the people who couldn't count. While I was student teaching, I had a student ask where Texas was on the map I was projecting on the screen. The map was of China, so the map was zoomed in a bit to the east. The kid was just trying to help you find the safe house. I believe the proper call is, do you have a Geiger counter? And the proper response is, mine is in the shop. At the college midterm, I had a guy comes up to me that I've never seen in class. He proceeded to ask me what his grade is. Check the sheet. He never turned in a single piece of homework, no quizzes, never attended a test. What did you think you have? You've got a solid F. Have a friend who is a professor. He told me about a student that was failing pretty hard near the end of the term. The student pleaded for extra credit to bring his grade up. My friend, being an understanding guy, eventually relented, saying if you do X, I'll give you a passing grade. My friend never heard from the student again until the grades came out for that term, and naturally, the student failed because he didn't do the extra credit work. The student was pissed and actually tried issuing a complaint with the dean about my friend. He hasn't offered extra credit since. When I was in high school, the same student asked, where is the Great Wall of China? Aren't the sun and moon the same thing? That guy with a Hitler mustache, did he win? Ugh, this effing kid. I'm sure everyone has one in their grade, the type that is told his answer is wrong, but somehow won't accept it, and defends his factually wrong answer with the weirdest bullshit logic. It was the year that the game Fable came out, and the slogan was, for every decision, a million outcomes. This kid was in my 9th grade English class and we were learning about actual fables. This kid asks the teacher, doesn't the word fable mean for a single decision, there's a million outcomes? Cue everyone in the class slowly turning their heads to look at him. The teacher said no. A fable is a short story or tale used to establish or show ethics and morals, something along those lines. Aka the actual meaning of the word fable. The kid goes, oh, well I think you're wrong cause there's this game that came out, and in the commercials it says for every decision there's a million outcomes. The teacher and this kid literally argued about the meaning of the word fable for like half an hour in class, and everyone's telling the kid he's wrong, and he refuses to accept it, because the commercial said otherwise. He didn't actually use the word otherwise. I'm sure that it's out of his vocabulary range, but he refused to relent. Fine rhyme. Shut the F up. Had a pupil ask me if the sun they saw in America was the same as the sun we saw here in Scotland, and why was their sun so much warmer living in Scotland. This one isn't hard to believe. PFFD, they are clearly not Scottish. They've seen the sun. I teach martial arts to little kids. I had a kid ask me if he could punch his mom now. Well, can he? Actually, his level of skill was not enough. She could easily dodge. Private writing instructor. A couple of years ago, I had a student ask me if commas were real or imaginary. He was equally dubious about semicolons, which he referred to as imitation periods, since people have asked. He was 26 and very serious. I took English at a local community college. One night while the class was working on something, and the teacher was reading over everyone's assignments from the night before she stopped the class and said the following sentence, guys, under no circumstances should a comma come in the middle of a word. I've seen several of you do this, and I have no idea why. It was honestly pretty hard not to laugh, mixing up, and perhaps, maybe they were writing in regex. This is the first question I've seen that I can't even understand. Just how, if you saw how they wrote their stories, you'd understand. The only punctuation they used were periods and apostrophes. That was it. They didn't get that there is a difference between apostrophes and quotation marks. Lots of people I teach are very smart, or at least very determined, and figure things out after some basic instruction. This particular individual was not compatible with anything having to do with the written word. Most of the idiotic questions I get are always linked to history. Though I'm an English teacher, they have no idea about different time periods or a sense of centuries. So I get questions such as, why didn't Dickens just get on a plane? Was the internet not around then? Then, being the 1700s, were the Victorians around when dinosaurs were? And these are 14 to 16 year olds. It gets even harder for them when thinking about the few decades prior to their existence, i.e. the 50s 90s. I wonder if we are all like that a little when we are so young. I teach elementary English in Korea. The best question I ever got was, teacher, what is chicken in English? Not a teacher, but an 8th grade sex ed class. We had a box where students could submit questions anonymously. One day, the teacher read aloud one of the questions, which asked, my dad's penis is circumcised but mine is not. Does this mean he isn't my dad? Yes, he believed circumcision was hereditary. Bless his heart. Those anonymous question boxes are so useful. Someone in my sex ed class wanted to know where the bone comes from. I'm so glad people had a way to get answers to this stuff pre-internet, or post-internet, but especially pre-internet. I'm glad to say I haven't seen my dad's penis. Well, judging by your username, I'd say you're pretty bad at your job then. Not a teacher, but during high school, one of the girls in my history class asked our teacher who had won WW2. We were like 14, and had spent the last 3 months studying WW2. Bonus points. We told her Germany won, and she believed us for a month till we took pity of her and explained that the Allies won. We convinced my friend that Germany had almost won the war. Then France had come out of nowhere and take over the entire continent, thus causing the Cold War. A girl back in my grade 9 science class once asked what happens to the egg in the mom's stomach when the baby hatches. We were covering sexual reproduction and the reproductive cycle, and in Quebec sex ed is taught in elementary school, most of them. Not a teacher, but in my freshman college class, one student asked our professor, you know how it says all men are created equal? Well, that's not true. Because like I'm good at hockey, but some people aren't, and some people are good singers, so that's wrong, isn't it? She didn't know how to answer that one, because she was stunned into silence. I'm not a teacher, but I'm a librarian/archivist and I used to work at a university. One time a student came in while I was doing reference, and he was waiting to pick up a print job or something, so he started asking me questions to pass the time. Which is cool, except it very quickly devolved into him flagrantly trying to impress/hit on me. I have no idea why. Basically, the dumbest question a student ever asked me was complete with what I'm sure were his best bedroom eyes. So have you ever read The Art of Seduction? Except it very quickly devolved into him flagrantly trying to impress/hit on me. I have no idea why. I got this one. You're cute. Can you get to America from Africa on a jet ski? You can if the jet ski is on a ship. Not a teacher, but I once heard a student say you actually believe in evolution. So you think monkeys just decided not to turn into people? To another student, and the teacher basically looked into the camera like he was on The Office, so to speak. The I don't actually understand evolution, but clearly it can't be true starter pack. Kid in my 10th grade biology class takes the cake for me. We were going over chromosomes, talking about the effects of an extra chromosome, Down syndrome, and this kid looks confused as hell, gears turning like mad in his head. Finally he raises his hand. With the extra chromosome, shouldn't they be, like, super the rose?